I'm Hans Engel from the Directors Guild of Canada. Welcome to our 8th episode of DGC Masterclass via Zoom, bringing you together with some of the most interesting creatives in the industry today. The DGC prides itself on being the place where the creative community of the industry comes together to celebrate and discuss the work. We're going behind the scenes and talking to some of the top creatives in the industry, covering directors, designers, picture and sound editors, with a new episode at least every Thursday, and we've been adding some special presentations on other days of the week. You'll receive a new invitation every week with a specific link to tune in. So far, we've had Emmy-winning director Jean-Marc Vallée, Emmy-winning editor Kelly Dixon, Oscar-winning designers David and Sandy Wasco, a special event with filmmaker Jeff Barnaby, two-time Oscar-nominated doc filmmaker Faraz Fayyad, two-time Oscar-winning sound editor Karen Baker-Landers, and Oscar and Palme d'Or nominee Adam Agoyan. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome the Oscar-nominated designers K.K. Barrett and Patrice Vermette. This masterclass came together a bit differently than others in that the subject was originally going to be Patrice, given his 2 Oscar noms and his extensive collaboration with Jean-Marc Vallée and Denis Villeneuve, including the upcoming not-to-be-mentioned Dune reboot. I didn't say that. Plenty of impressive work to talk about. But Patrice was really more interested in having a conversation about design and expressed a long-time admiration for the work of tonight's guest, K.K. Barrett, whom he didn't know. So I said to Patrice, why don't we get the 2 of you together and have a conversation? Best of both worlds for me. I get 2 superstar designers and he gets to hang out with K.K. Barrett. And here we are. Less a standard masterclass than 2 designers at the height of their game in conversation. Thrilled to have you both. Welcome.
Thank you, Hans.
K.K. Barrett grew up in the plains of Nebraska and Oklahoma. I'm really looking forward to reading this, K.K. It's such an interesting bio. He studied art in college as a painter and sculptor. He then was involved in the music scene in Los Angeles and New York in 1977-79 as a drummer in an avant noise synth band. Those of you who know what that is, please send me an email. That led to his first production design challenge for a film called Population 1, an underground film. He's self-taught as a film designer. He began just prior to the advent of MTV and used music videos and commercials along with a few no-budget horror films to learn by trial and glorious error. After 10 years of absence from feature films, during which he did graphic design, ran an underground hip-hop club, played guitar in a chaos rock band, and did animation, he returned to take films seriously with Spike Jonze on a little-known film called Being John Malkovich. Working on early films by Michel Gondry, Sofia Coppola, Charlie Kaufman, and David O. Russell, there was a pattern of unique films outside of genre. Amazing films, amazing filmmakers. Working with Karen O from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, they created Stop the Virgins as a live psycho opera that played in New York and Sydney, Australia. And working with Kid Koala, he directed a silent film, Euphonia Must Fall, scored and filmed live before an audience at each performance that toured the world, which KK was telling me earlier actually began in Montreal and went to TIFF before it went out to the rest of the world. His MTV awards are for Smashing Pumpkins videos Tonight, and Beck's New Pollution. Art Director Guild nominations for Lost in Translation, Where the Wild Things Are, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, and a win for the film Her. BAFTA nomination for Marie Antoinette, and Oscar nomination for Her. Welcome, KK.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here with Patrice.
And Patrice, absolutely. In 1991, following his studies at Concordia University in Montreal, Patrice started his career designing music videos, there's a music theme here, and television commercials. His feature film career took off in 2005 with the release of Jean-Marc Vallée's incredible film Crazy. Patrice followed up with Jean-Marc Vallée's next projects, Café de Flore and The Young Victoria, for which he received his first Academy Award nomination in 2010. His recent credits include The Mountain Between Us, Vice, Enemy, Prisoners, Sicario, and Arrival. Absolutely incredible, for which he received his second Oscar nomination in 2017. Patrice designed the upcoming Dune, reuniting once again with Denis Villeneuve. Welcome, Patrice.
Thank you. Thank you, Hans.
Fantastic. Now, before I turn it over to Patrice and KK, I'd like to point out to our viewers tonight the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. That is where you should feel free to type in questions throughout the night. Both KK and Patrice throughout the masterclass will be looking at that, watching your questions. They'll try to as many questions as possible, but know that they likely won't be able to get to all of them. Have a great conversation tonight. And over to you, Patrice and KK. I'll see you at the end. Have a great time.
Thank you. Thank you, Hans. All right.
Okay, Patrice.
So, KK, yes, I've got to admit, I've been a fan of your work for a long time, actually, for a long time. And you know, we have these. When I was doing commercials in the '90s and the 2000s, and they were like these tapes called shots, and they were always like coming. I think it was every month, and we couldn't wait to see the new. And every time there was a commercial that everybody was amazed, or there was a music video that everybody was amazed, and your name was in it. You collaborated in it. And anyways, I've been admiring your work, and I'd like to know more about you and where you come from. I'd like to know who's behind the KK letters, basically.
I think I've been very lucky to be passed around by very smart, creative people that I've been lucky enough to work with. It became a bit incestuous, but it was, I'd like to say, I love working with one director for a long time, but I like sleeping around as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those credits, especially through my early days in commercials and music videos, kind of attest to that. And I usually went on to do a film with those people when they became feature filmmakers as well, if not more than one. Yeah.
It's we had talked about that. It's I also I also commercials and music videos, and that's something that a lot of people have. You know, I think we've got somewhat similar similar journey, because for me, I've learned so much doing again, I've learned more from my mistakes than from my good things. Doing music videos and sometimes like messing it up totally, but I found that as an experimental lab, trying stuff, and also meeting new people and meeting great creative directors and great DPs as well, and making a trio or like a creative group and exploring. And I always found that a lot of these interesting people, even all the directors doing commercials or music videos, always have a script that they want to do, they dream of doing, they dream of getting financed. And that's I always encourage people to go through the route of commercials, and don't like embrace commercials as and see it more as an experimental lab to meet people and to get your ideas across, and being able to sell your ideas. I think it's a great way to get to learn to learn how to do your job, basically your craft.
You certainly get to learn where the mistakes are.
Of course, yes, you do.
And you can celebrate them with and without financing, given whether it's a music video or a commercial.
No, and we pick up tricks, and you know, we get to play as you move up the ladders in commercials. You get to play with toys that otherwise you would not know about, like tools, whether it's like cameras or like you were with visual effects. You get involved in and then you can actually learn from that and bring it in the other field. When you do you can answer, you can solve problems because you got more tools in your toolbox, I think.
I didn't think about that, but it's very true, the visual effects part, because when I did the first film that I did, Population 1, in 79, we were fumbling our way through some green screen, and it was so early that it was chroma key, and and we were shooting on film, but then we were having to insert those content elements later. One time we had 3 different screens, and we didn't know how to separate the information, and we had an orange screen and a green screen and a blue screen, rather than mats like we have now. Easy garbage mats. We said, okay, those are the target areas. That way we can all, contaminate them one at a time. But we learned a lot from visual effects quicker in commercials than the films I was working on early on, because there was money to play with it, and they always, and a smaller window. So
and in commercials, they always wanted to play with the new agencies and directors. They always wanted to play with the new, what's the new thing, and
who's new,
and we get exposed to those tools.
Yeah,
and we learn from them.
The other thing I wanted to do was, when I started taking commercials seriously, I never took any of this seriously. I still don't know if I do, but
you should never. The day you start taking it seriously, change your job, become a
Exactly. So one of those jobs that we don't envy. But I wanted to work with, I wasn't going to be able to work with other designers, but I was able to work with many directors. I was able to work with many DPs and saw how they worked and had different attitudes. And you get to work with Harris Savides and Conrad Hall, and like somebody new every week, repetitively. And beyond that, you got to change genres. Both me and you have been very lucky. I think you may have even done more genres than I have. Not getting pegged for being the guy that does one type of film.
And that's super important to be able to.
So important,
jump, because you can so easily be. I've got even in commercials. I had some friends who like they've been doing. He's the comedy guy, but the guy wants to do drama, and he's like, yeah, but I want to do something else. I dream of doing sci-fi, but they're pinholed into it's great.
Or the DP that's the car guy,
or the food, or
stylist,
It's funny because some great DPs that I've worked with, sometimes they, like in the production companies, I've heard like maybe those DPs were never really aware of the dangerous position they were in, but we're looking for a scar reel, but that's an amazing DP. What do you mean? Like if you can shoot this film, don't tell me you cannot shoot a car. And but we need to. Hey, ask the guy in the video tech to put together like a reel for our DP, which like whatever films he did with cars or with food, or it's ridiculous,
I was so happy when YouTube and IMDb came out and could put the reel to sleep a little bit. And at first I was just chopping commercial bits together and saying like, oh, here's the snippet of this that I like, and here's the snippet of this, and sometimes showing the whole thing to show that there was diversification. When, as Hans mentioned, that I quit doing commercials, I quit doing feature films for 10 years. I had done 3 films back to back, no budget, Blood Diner, Bloody Pom Poms, which they changed the name to Cheerleader Camp, and Crack House. And I was just doing this because after I did the first film, I thought, okay, I've done that. I'll never do film again. That was a nice experience. And then I got known as a cheap problem solver, and so all the problems would come to me. But then I do these films, and I say, oh, I made it look like $100,000 for $10,000, and you'd go up for a proper film, and they go like, well, we really want something that looks like $10 million for $100,000. And so they didn't take you seriously. And so my scrappy little films, I realized weren't going to, at that point, I needed to go out and find something else to represent myself. And that's when I started doing, luckily videos came along, and I was able to do commercials. And the genre would change every week. One week was a beauty white psych doing hair, and the next week was sci-fi. and then a Western, and then comedy, and then a faux drama, different lighting techniques. It looked like I'd been working for years.
I know, it's crazy. It's like, it's bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
It's,
And it also said,
change director, DPs, and yeah, it's crazy.
It was like you were training for the Olympics or something.
Absolutely.
You were ready to make decisions quickly, absorb what was necessary, figure out what had an impact, what was fun, what tickled you that you could, pass on to the audience. And it was nonstop. And then the next week there was another. Next week there was another. I think it was the best training ground. And I still go back to it for energy.
It's funny you mentioned you were known as the problem solver with no money, because I also got that etiquette at one point, that label, and not etiquette but label in English, about like being the guy who can do things like, if you don't have money for music video, get Patrice, or get and the first movie that I ever did had an even worse title than the titles you mentioned. It was Snowboard Academy, man. It was no money. And with a title like Snowboard Academy, I'm sure you can guess what the script was. Storyline. And after that experience, I did like two other movie of the weeks. And I said, you know what? This isn't for me. I'm just gonna be a commercial guy, and I'm gonna enjoy my life being a commercial guy. I'm gonna try to be the best commercial guy ever. And then it's funny, and I tried to convince myself for a long time that's what my future was. What
was the breakthrough? What made you go back to features?
Well, it was I had done a short film and a short film, and then multiple commercial with Jean-Marc Vallée, and we became kind of a really good team together. And we would even go to changing for agency pitch, for bids, they would send us the treatment and the board, and we would just look at it and just change everything and just do our own stuff. And I really enjoy working with him. And one day as we were talking earlier, the directors, they all commercial directors, they always have like a script, like under their elbow or their armpit. I don't know how you say that in English, but he asked me to read a script called Crazy. And he said, I know you told me you don't want to do feature films, but I think you should read this because I'd love to do it with you. And that was it. I said, oh man, it's really good, but I don't want to do. And he kind of insisted. I'm super happy that he did, because we had a blast on that movie, man. And that's kind of made me fall in love with making movies seriously, because Jean-Marc is super passionate, and his passion is it's like the coronavirus. It spreads very easily in the team, and so then that was it. I wanted to do more feature films, but at that time, after that, I said, I want to choose the feature film. I'm never going to do another Snowboard Academy or Hidden Agenda again.
I don't think I went back. I don't think I've done another. Certainly haven't done another Blood Diner or Bloody Pom Poms again. Yeah.
But I always promised myself someday I'm going to go back to do like the sequel to Snowboard Academy or something, just for the fun of it, just for the fuck of it. That'd be funny.
But I don't really have rules, like the last film I took because nobody thought I would ever take
I was surprised.
It was a superhero movie, and they said like, what you're going to do that? And I go like, surprised you.
I was surprised when I saw your name. I was like, oh my God, like he's going for the DC Comics.
Going in, yeah.
He's going in, all in.
Yeah, I thought it turned out to be the best situation where, okay, this is something where they wanted to reinvent. I didn't have a legacy to fulfill.
Yeah, because that's dangerous when you have to follow the book.
It's so dangerous. It wasn't
like shooting a Procter & Gamble commercial.
Yeah, I mean, those things kind of came up later, but they had promised me that it wasn't going to be like that. So held them to their word. And we were just able to play, which was good. So it's a good experience. Done it. Check.
Check. Would you do another one?
I don't know. You say no, and then you go like, well, there's always the right situation. I'm not looking for another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little bit too producty.
I'm still like on the fence. When will I want to do one? Because I'm interested of the experience of seeing how a big machine like that works. Like but I'm a bit scared.
Well, it's kind of like when all of our friend DPs did Star Wars, one after another. But
when Bradford and Greg did Star Wars,
yeah, exactly.
Yes, but they also came back. We done it. Check.
Check. Greg did it right after he had done Lion,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved his work on Lion. And
amazing.
Star Wars was good too, but it just, I could see his voice in Lion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
well, you'll see his voice in Dune.
Yeah, I'm sure I will.
Yeah.
I'm sure I will.
He got
now, that's what happens. So at one point, luckily, I was loyal and directors were loyal to me, and I got to do a $100,000 film, which was Where the Wild Things Are, with the previous height of budget was 40 million, and this was 100 million. And did I say 100,000? It was 100 million. And so you usually have to get vetted. They think, well, can you do that? Can you handle that? Can you handle that size and scale and that large of a team?
Yeah.
And when the director insists and you haven't failed on the way up terribly, then you're fine. You're not in movie jail. And I got to do that. But at the same time, there was a point where I realized I may have to do a large budget movie just so if there's something that I'm really dying to do that comes along,
That's
and
fine.
they discount me because I wasn't in that league, I may have to have that calling card. Luckily, I got to do it with people I know, rather than having to step outside my, boundaries.
I felt the same way in the last movie. I felt supported. If I wanted to move up a budget like that, being with Denis and having Greg come along, you feel protected at some degree, which is good.
Yeah, no, it's very, very important.
There's a great question. I'm sorry, I just noticed that question. You were a philosophical consultant on the Fatboy Slim video. Describe. I think that's fascinating.
I actually started that video, and then it was shot over Christmas, and I had to turn it over to somebody and bail, and I felt so bad about bailing just before the shoot that that's a title that Spike made up for me, because the art director that I handed over to said, so what am I doing? Am I designing this? And I said, yeah, you have to make all the decisions, because when I'm leaving, I'm gone. And so he took that title, and he won an MTV award for it. And as consolation, Spike gave me the title of philosophical. But he used to always say that I was like the philosopher, because I would tear everything apart and wonder why it ticked. I just couldn't take things at face value. And I would dig in and just keep asking questions, and, to everyone's annoyance, until they just like, well, we'll just wing this. And I go, no, let's think about it again. That's what it seems like on the surface. Let's dig deeper. Is there another way to do this? Is there another way to see this that we haven't seen?
It's a great title, and your aura was definitely in that music video. How did you end up meeting that crop of extremely talented group of
there was a commercial and music video production company called Propaganda Satellite in Los Angeles in the 90s, in the early 90s, and they were pretty on top of their game. They were doing the highest budget music videos. David Fincher was there. Mark Romanek was there.
All the interesting one were there, actually.
Yeah, and Spike was there, and Spike was just beginning there, and was doing some other commercials, some Budweiser Frogs commercials or something crazy there. And I kept going by Spike's office and kind of looking in and saying, hey, what's going on? What are you guys doing, And he was doing some interesting videos, but I hadn't done anything with him yet. And I believe I started with him the designer he was using was leaving town, and I got in on the second commercial that he did. And then we just kind of got on a roll, and the rest of his team was all together. The DP, the costume designer, the editor, the producer, the AD had all been working with him for about a year at that point. And then I joined, and we continued for about 8 years doing everything. But during that first year,
that whole group,
yeah,
the first AD, the costume designer, the producer, all that core group for 8 years. Wow.
It's finally exploded now, but it was together for a long time. But at the first year, we would do one after another, commercial video, commercial video, commercial video. And we had so much fun doing it. It was so playful. And there was a script that came along called We Can Do This. And it was a Beastie Boys movie that they had written.
Wow.
And it was really challenging. And it was going to be for like $100,000. And everybody said, can we do this? Can we do this? And the name of the movie is We Can Do This. Can we do this? Yeah, let's do it. Even though we were, we didn't know how we were possibly going to pull it off. But we'd done pretty scrappy stuff already. So that would have been my return to filmmaking, to feature filmmaking, and my return to low budget, uber low budget. But at the last minute, they decided they didn't want to do it. And then the Being John Malkovich script landed in Spike's lap, and we turned tail, and I think within 3 or 4 months, we were working on that instead. And that was the end of Propaganda. They were kind of going into receivership and falling apart and bankruptcy. And so they were being bought by Polygram. And so we got the movie funded, but nobody was really watching us. And so, except for Steve Golan, who later produced The Revenant and many other good films, but he was kind of our guardian angel that kind of said, okay, here's your money. I don't know about this, but let's go.
I read somewhere that it was a location, that floor.
It was. Yeah. Spike's idea was that it was a building that was it was from the 1860s, but remodeled in the 1980s, because that's more of his era. And we looked everywhere, and I found a floor that was a U shape around a courtyard where you could have views to the outside world with buildings outside. You can also look across the courtyard and stage people in those windows if they wanted to spy back and forth, which some of the story points needed. And we took the ceiling down, and in a terrible remodeling way with T-bar ceiling, typical tile, and dropped it to the middle of the double hung windows, and then put cornice molding on it to give it a grounding, a finality. And then we had pathways through where everybody had such backaches from leaning down and walking through there that you could go through a couple of doors that we knew about and stand upright. And
did you guys have an on-set masseuse for everybody and making sure that nobody gets the company propaganda is not sued for back injuries and?
No, we were too young and pliable. It didn't. We just stuck it out. But yeah, so it was a real floor. Ironically, when we did adaptation, there's a scene because Charlie Kaufman.
You go back in adaptation. You go back there.
Go back, and we use a little bit of footage of behind-the-scenes footage of the real movie, and then we had to build the floor, and I had to build it on a stage this time. So it's very meta that I had to take this stage that was on the 7th and a half floor where you went into a door and went underground, and yet I had the next time it was in a real location. I had to bring it back to, and I believe that was on the 11th floor of the location. And I had to bring it back to stage and elevate it just enough where it looked like that's how the real film was made.
Because that takes a lot of guts to bring people for such a long. I don't know how many shooting days there were in that place, but first of all to bring, to build something with using, obviously there must have been freight elevators or something, but it's always like do I want to suffer the wrath of the crew by making a decision to bring all that?
I don't think we took it into account. We built it in place. We probably built some flats, beforehand, but there was so much that we got out of the location. This is always the battle that we choose. Like, how much do we want to control the environment, and how much does the location give us of what we inherently want anyway. And what's the budget trade-off? What's the logistical trade-off? What's the control?
Absolutely.
And what's the stylistic statement? But it was the solution. I mean, everything we do is about creative solutions.
Yeah.
And even when we make what seems like a concession sometimes, there's often a time, and I think this comes from our low budget problem solving, that we can flip that and it doesn't come out to be a concession. I like to say,
Yeah.
That's
there for a reason.
We don't want that. And I say, oh, we're going to celebrate that. You know, take the word.
You embrace it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got a question here that I think we're going to enjoy. How does music influence your research or early conversations with a director on a non-music project?
Wow. You can answer this one as well.
Yeah, I can actually.
We both came from, we've been playing a little bit of tag here, and we realized that we both come from playing in bands in our young days. And when I was in bands, the last band I was in was me and two painters, and it was all instrumentals.
And wait a minute, all three of you were painters. It's not you.
All of us were painters. This was done when I'm already working in film.
Okay.
We'd get together once a week and make up songs. You know, we just spontaneously make stuff up, and then we'd shape it and have a critique and go back and forth. And it felt so much, it really dawned on me that all of these creative abstractions and their solutions are exactly the same as whether you're looking at a visual problem, what to put in the foreground, what to let recede into the background, but let be support. You were saying that the designers, you thought of us like bass players.
Absolutely. I studied in communication studies at Concordia University in Montreal, which I specialize into sound design. My dream was to do music for films and be a record producer. That's what I dreamt back then. And
I had that same dream.
I was going to
that's
go
as close as I came to like including film in my future possibilities. You know, I was going to be an artist or a musician.
Same thing.
Yeah.
I was, after university, I was gonna go to, back then it was the Manchester years in the 80s, late 80s. I was gonna move to Manchester and become either a drug addict or yeah, exactly. But no, and the last year I was in university. I wrote a lot of soundtrack for short films. So music has always been part of and I actually started doing music videos because I generally thought that if I was going to go to work on a music videos, I was going to get to know people from the music industry, and maybe that would be my way in, so that was kind of, and yeah, it was kind of funny, and how to wait a minute, the question was your research or early conversation. Yes. It's funny because I really, like, when I started working with Jean-Marc Vallée in the 90s, that's how we actually really connected, was through music. And he used to send me songs on commercials or a playlist. We used to give me a DVD. Our discussions weren't about visuals at all.
That was not where the excitement generated from.
It was giving me like a DVD and a CD, sorry, and he says, listen to this and create something. It's like it was kind of a part of our discussion. Our music is the best way, or sound is the best way to describe a mood.
Yeah, definitely.
I think music is also it's the only real time traveling machine. When you hear something that you connect to, you can hear this conversations back when you first heard the song, or when you connected with a song. You can smell the things. You can. It's crazy.
I think it's also it wins, over the other art forms, because you don't have to stop to pay attention to it. You can absorb it below the waist. You can absorb it in the head. You can absorb it in the chest, in the heart. There's so many different ways. You can be doing something else. You can be reading. So. Yeah. you can't be
it's
focused. You don't have to go to a museum. You know, it's ethereal. You can portably take it with you anywhere you want. It
it's
can be loud. It can be quiet. It's just so. It's such a good consumer product.
you know, creating soundscapes. It's the same. I always say it's the same as. For me, there's not much of a difference between creating a soundscape or creating an ambience in which actors are going to evolve in. It's strangely it's the same. I always listen to music when I work. Sometimes it's a bit too loud. So there's some people who, whenever I walk out of the office, I forget to take the volume down. They come in and they put the volume down for me. And I realize, sorry, I've been gone from my office for an hour and the music was playing super loud.
It's funny. I used to work in offices where the music was nonstop, and I'd play it all the time. And in groups, I really don't do that so much anymore. But when I'm at home, I come downstairs and immediately put music on in the morning. And if I'm staying up late at night, which unfortunately I have that habit of staying up forever, then there's music. I'll be doing anything and put music on. It's a constant.
Cool.
So I think it informs. It's where my headspace gets clear. It triggers. It cleans the palate. It triggers ideas. I don't know if it's. I think your example of it being passed back and forth, as a playlist for inspiration, is the purest connection to that answer.
No, I think so. I think so too. Such an important part of the process for me. Music. I've got albums that for me are like they relate to a particular movie. It's like, okay, that album represents now the inspiration point for the design of a movie, even though when the movie is finished, none of that music is part of the movie. But for me, what I was listening to is like,
it's also important when you're scouting, and besides the conversations you have, sometimes you have long drives and who controls the music.
Oh, man. And it's great. There's so many discoveries. You do that. Like the DP plays a bit of his songs. Like Bradford is great. When you drive with Bradford, he's got such an amazing taste for music, and then the director, and then it creates it bonds people together in the scout van. Definitely.
Yeah.
Speaking of music again.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a question for you. And it's about what was KK's experience with Michel Gondry on Let Forever Be, possibly the greatest music video ever? I kind of agree with that. And can I tell the scoop?
Yeah.
And the drummer, was it you?
Yes. Yeah.
You're the drummer in that music video. Yeah.
So Michel always has crazy ideas, and he stays up. He's an insomniac. I'm not an insomniac. I just like to stay up late at night. He stays up and works all these things down. And when he presents something to you, sometimes it'll be a full model made that he worked up. He went to Home Depot in the middle of the night and put together and brought to you. And on that video, his concept was using all of the cheesy transition effects that used to be on Grass Valley video switchers and things like that.
Yeah, like the Amiga system.
And create them live.
Yeah, wow.
Wipes and picture-in-picture and panned out hexagrams of the same image and all these crazy ideas. And so, but he wanted to do it for nothing. And he knew that the key was, the anchor point was a drummer, and he wanted to be the drummer because he was a drummer in a band originally before being a director, in a band called Oui Oui. Oui.
That sounds so French.
Ouais. Yes. And he started making music videos for his own band and then became a director. And he realized that since there was just going to be two of us, the subject, there's an actress, and the subject drummer and the camera, that was the team. And he was going to run the camera, that he couldn't be the drummer. So he said, you're a drummer, you're going to be the drummer. And he'd been to my house and we'd played music in the basement sometime. And he realized I was a drummer as well and said, okay, you're going to be the drummer. He says, but you're like a bum, you're a homeless drummer. So he gave me a scraggly fake beard and messed up hair. And I kept haunting this girl and showing up in these different scenes as we went through the palette of the different special effects. Yeah, it was a great experience. It was really fun. It's a really good song too.
It is. And it's still that song still stand the test of time. It's still, you know, it's, you could release that song now and it's still great. You know.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a rip of Tomorrow Never Knows. And the playback was just some guy with a boombox, you know, holding it up and playing the song and starting it again and again and again. And then they had to sync the edit manually later.
Huh.
Yeah. What about you? What was your favorite video? Have you been cast in one?
I did a couple, but you would not know them because it was Canadian music videos of bands that were stopped at the borders for some smuggling maple syrup or something like that. So it's a big thing here, like smuggling maple syrup. When we go
Really?
No, it's not. It's just, I'm just saying.
I wouldn't think so.
No, but it's I had fun. I wish I think I want to do music videos again. I had so much fun doing music videos, but here we were doing them. You say like you were doing things for close to nothing, but here we were like the budget was like $250 or tops $500 and it was just about being creative and you know and sometimes funny stories. You know, in a music video, the scene is just like a room full of flowers. But when you got a very tight budget, where do you pick flowers? Overnight, I went into a cemetery and I took some flowers. And I know I'm gonna go to hell for doing that. But that was back in the my early 20s. So
I had to wean myself from some of my cheap habits like that. I know that we're doing a commercial for some beauty product, and we had a beautiful shot of this naked girl in a swimming pool at night with the sprinkler going down so it looked like rain, and we sunk the bottom of the pool with black visqueen so it looked like infinity and you couldn't tell it was a swimming pool. But we needed some greenery. We needed some big exotic leaves, and we rented some or bought some, but we kind of ran out. And I just told the guys, you know what? Just go down to the Department of Water and Power. They have these huge philodendrons outside, and just go razor them off. Try to get the ones from the back. They'll grow back. And I think we did a lot of that in the early days.
Yeah, it's like
in around the pool to kind of hide the offending parts in that shot.
It's crazy. You know what? It's like it's a statement that like we do things like it's nothing. You know, like it's nothing. I used to say I don't want to because how can I say this? It's like when you're really like thriving for something, you're very passionate. At some point, I was very naive at the beginning, and I did things that maybe were, but you know, illegal. Yes.
Illegal or immoral.
Okay, let's admit it. Let's use the word. The I word is yes. It was very illegal sometimes, or I was borrowing stuff. Let's say, and just because you just want it to work, and you just like. You just go for it and like
it's for the greater cause.
Yeah, and then you know, like you put it back where it was. I'm not talking about the flowers in the cemetery that I never put them back, but some other things you're like it's funny. Yeah
I think it's okay. I think, you know, I've often wanted to go back. I did a really inexpensive movie a few years ago called Woodshock, where I did it old school, and just me and a couple of people went off into the woods in the California redwoods, and we did this horror movie. And I'd never done one before, so I really wanted to do it, and I really liked the voice of people who haven't directed before. These two girls that were fashion designers, and they'd written a horror script, and I said, this sounds great. This is going to be something different. And I did that, and we did it for no budget. And I'm a big proponent of trying to find locations. I think you could curate an entire film, given everybody understood the limitations of what the storyline was, and it didn't ask for spaceships, by choosing locations and what you didn't choose, editing out what to show and what not to show. I think that's a lot of what we do anyway.
Absolutely.
And you could go to a place and make it look completely foreign, even though it was something you were very familiar with, by disincluding some of the obvious trademarks that you think anchor that space. That's kind of what we tried to do in Her.
It was actually brilliant, the way you created the not so far away, the near future, by using both LA and Shanghai. That's very difficult to do. So like to make it believable, but you know they anchor it, but create have a vision of the future, which is
Let it go.
You? That was you?
Yeah, it's my phone. Yeah.
I thought it was Hans for some reason.
I'll get back to that.
The ghost of Hans. But no, it's well done in Her. Yeah.
It was a good concept. I mean, a lot of these, things come from, here's the concept. How do we really do it? We were talking about this earlier, the things you came up with for Arrival. On that one, Spike said, it's going to be in Los Angeles, but it's not now, but it's not that far away. And we didn't really understand how far away it was. Finally, we realized Siri came out during that commercial. I mean, during the prep for the film. And in the end, we kind of rewrote the story of where it took place and when it took place. And it was in Los Angeles, but it was one OS release from now. So that could be 6 months. That could be
exactly. It's
any time. So everything was fairly grounded and believable, except for the intelligence of the operating system.
And even so, like we're not that far. I think it's like and it was super subtle. The detail, the pants. I love the pants.
Yeah, well, that's another thing.
It was great.
Do you ever play this game? Early on films, I try to make some rules. Talk about curating by what you don't include.
Yeah.
On that film, I said, okay, if it's going to be the world we know but different, let's take away things that we see every day. So I took away, and here I'm stepping on the costume designers' toes, because before they came on, I said,
but it's part of our job then.
Let's take away jeans. Let's take away sports clothes. Let's take away graphics. Like have no signage. Let's take away, I guess that was it. And then the costume designer came on and said, okay, let's get rid of belts. Let's get rid of collars. And then Hoyte came along and said, let's get rid of blue. And I'm always in favor of losing a color.
Yeah.
And of course, those things kind of crept in here and there. There's some signage. There had to be advertising in the for the storyline for the OS.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some stuff that leaked in Shanghai in the background. But for the most part, it was neutered.
The owl was you, right?
Well, it was a combination. I said, let's make all of the commercials. I had this idea for ads, for billboards, or even commercials. I'd still love to implement this, where it was just a still image, a single image with no explanation of what they're selling or what's going on. And I think it would involve people, because they'd all be guessing, well, I think it's this, I think it's this. They'd all be writing their own storyline and their own content for it.
Right.
And you could put a bump on it later and say, you didn't know what that's for. That was for this, And so we decided to make the ad for the OS slow motion, those people fighting and tumbling. And then Bennett Miller found the slow motion owl and gave it to Spike. And so that became the second billboard. Yeah.
I've got a question here. Since you have both worked on smaller projects like music videos as well as multi-million-dollar projects, could you speak to how your experience of smaller projects inform your design sensibilities into large ones? Also, how did you know you were ready to take the challenge of big budget project? Did we answer that already?
We've been hitting on that pretty hard lately. Because all of those kind of ideas that we just spoke about were applicable to when you have no money, or when you want to make a design statement, but you don't have the budget to build, or the control, or the time. And
I think it's great. We apply it for troubleshooting, and it's always part of for me, it's how part of my brain works, and I never think in a way of like I've got too much. I always think in the way that let's make this the most. I never design that. Let's spend it. I never. It's like I try to do what's right, what I feel is right, and I try to do it for like in a box. It's part of my process to try to.
I think a lot of it is growing the intuition.
Yeah.
We trust ourselves. I know that after I did the low budget movie Woodshock, and I wanted to get rid of, we tried to get rid of technology in Her, because when we wanted to focus on the technology, it was a portal to an intelligence. And so it was a very important thing. We didn't want to have, we had to have the phone because that was another scripted element that was a portal to this intelligence. But those were the only two devices. We didn't want to see it everywhere. So in the next film, which took place in contemporary time, we decided also to strip away cell phones and computers, because in a horror film, you don't want to have immediate contact to be able to reach out beyond and get help at any moment. You want to be stranded and isolated. And that's something we did in that instance to focus the film. And some people caught us on it and other people didn't realize it was missing. They just, I never saw a telephone. I think there was a wall phone because they lived in the country. But there were no computers. There were no cell phones when you went out by yourself and a contact with the stabilized world. And so you take one thing from the last project and realize it helps to condense ideas and move it to the next project, always with the characters in mind and what it's doing to help their situation, rather than do something that will seemingly fit in the story, but go against the rules of this character's journey.
You know what? I've experienced when we did Prisoners. I experienced something quite weird because I was presenting design ideas and like how we and the way that I read the script and I was discussing with Denis, it was just like when I first read the script, I took my car. It was a rainy day in Montreal, and I went. I asked my wife to drive me around, and I said, if this story would happen in Montreal, where would it happen? So we drove around like in the what I call the exurb. It's not the suburb, but it's the small towns that have just from the past 20 years started to join each other, and what joins them is like strip malls and like power centers, and it's the cities that have lost their humanity, and it's just becomes bland, and they all look the same, and the human lose their grasp on who they are, because everything looks the same. You turn around, could you be in this town or the other town? You take a picture, nobody really knows, because that's what our beautiful society is going. So basically, we're doing it was not a huge budget, but it was still a pretty decent budget. And one day one of the producers comes into my office and closes the door and says, I don't care what people are saying, but I don't think like a $60 million budget movie should look like a small independent movie.
I've had that
happen. I'm like, what do you mean? He says that you could spend more money and you could make it. I said, I think
for the
story. For the characters. It's not the story we're telling. I genuinely think that the story we are telling, it's not about people who live in big houses, or they are humble people who live in a suburb, and their houses should be like that. They're not McMansions, and they're not and so it was funny. It's like I came in with my concept of like independent filmmaking, as opposed to commercial Hollywood. What you expect, from
what you expect from design. I think that's a big mistake, that people think design is flash and flourish.
Design could be
what you found on your drawing,
and you decide to put like a red plastic bag between the two cars, which is dragged by the wind, and because it tells a story. It's about the stories you're trying to tell. It's
Yeah,
not
I think
about
when you took your drive, you found the area as soulless, yet the people that inhabited that world didn't realize their soul had been scraped bare. But that's exactly what happens in that film. They become something they didn't think they were.
Yeah, exactly. And it's it's like and it's like when you do even now, like because for comfort, or like you say, okay, let's do this, instead of doing it in a location, let's do it on stage for this and that reason. Because I always try to put like the architectural enigma, or the architectural mistake, to make it look real. Like the column, which is not at the right place.
Celebrate the flaw. Yeah.
Celebrate the flaws. So like I get inspiration for some locations that I'm like, wow, this is so odd. It would be great to do this. And a lot of times people, they look at me and they say, like, are you mad? This is gonna block the camera. Like, the way you put your kitchen cupboard is gonna block the head of the. Why not? Because that's reality,
That's what makes
We're
you look
designing
at
for film, but if it tells something about the character, that's what's the most important,
Yeah. We did that in Being John Malkovich. We were intentionally trying to break all the rules of good composition. Like, you don't have an actress with a lamp coming out the top of her head. There's a scene at dinner, and I think they're smoking a joint, and Catherine Keener's holding it, and we had to put a wire in the ash so it goes right across somebody's face. So you got a frame with a long ash, and everybody's like, intrigued with the tension of the suspense. When's that ash going to drop? Why is that there? Why is it in front of their face? It made them pay attention again. And I think that's one of the jobs that we have that's unknown, is not just getting the audience's attention, but refocusing and reattaching the audience. If there's a lull, we can fill that gap. It doesn't mean we've both done. It's an interesting parallel. We've both done big Queen costume dramas.
Oh yeah, I want to talk to you about that, actually.
Yeah, and usually, and you were nominated for one, and deservedly.
You should have been for yours, actually.
I wasn't nominated for mine because it kind of disappeared. But typically, those films, the ones with the most art direction, get nominated for awards. And I think part of the problem is people think of production design as how much effort, how big, how grand, how noisy. And I think that they miss the point that a lot of the work that we do is keeping a balance of awkwardness to beauty. Absolutely. And noise to beauty, and simplicity. Absolutely. And invisibly being the bass player and refocusing attention to the story without trying to steal the thunder by overwhelming it.
Yeah, no, you and I spoke in a previous conversation. It's not about being the lead guitarist and going into a solo, but it's about like supporting the rhythm section, the bass line, which is sometimes almost unaudible for some people, but it's there and it supports the story, and it just gets the flapping happens, or the little happens. It's at the right spot. I think you do that so well, man. It's incredible.
It's all got to sync though.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I just think that I've gotten comments before on films that didn't do so well, where they, you can tell that they didn't like the film, and they go like, I love your work. Your stuff looked really great. I go like, no, but what about the entire film? Because I don't really want to stand out from the film. I want it to be integral, and I want it to lift the film, and support it in the proper way. And if it means, being the drummer and the bass player and working on the pelvis to the audience, that's great. But I don't want to be a show off and steal attention.
No.
Unless it's needed to get the audience's attention again, because we're shifting emotional tone. And I think that a lot of young people, when they're starting out, think, I want to build something, I want to get big, look what I did. And it's not, the subtleties are more important.
Yeah, it's like it's like I've got a friend who's an architect now, but it was funny because when he was studying his first year in university, one of his projects was to make a chair. And the chair that he designed and built was a collection of so many ideas, man. It just was just, and I think when you do a movie, when you have to be subtle and know exactly where it's like throwing in I've been through that, and throwing too many ideas into something, and I've learned from it, because you're like, okay, then I'm missing out the point of what it's about. It's trying to show that you're too that never works.
I think that's the other biggest job that we have, besides when they talk about designing something. It's not really making this grand piece of gold framework. It's really about making everything belong to this one moment that we experienced during this singular story. And hopefully it doesn't belong to that other film. If it's a film of a similar story or a similar time period, so that you confuse the two films. So things that, and you can ruin your own film by having something that was maybe the greatest idea and the thing you were most excited about it when you began, or even the director was most excited about. And then there's a point where the film has grown to a point where that really doesn't belong anymore.
No, it's not.
You have to say to each other, you know what? Nah, that doesn't fit. We've learned so much more on this journey, and we've purified things, and we know the rules of what's in and what's out, that let's toss that baby out now.
And I think one of the biggest, the most important thing between the relationship between a director and a designer, and also a DP, is being honest with each other. When, when you really, I think I've got a great idea, but the DP goes like, you know what? You really think, yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm too much in love with that idea, but it doesn't fit in the movie, and vice versa. We can tell the director and it's just being honest, because we're all in this to make the best possible project. Sometimes ideas that we think are great, and they've lived with us for such a long time, maybe they don't, because movies, I always say they're an animal that needs to be tamed. It's a wild animal that needs to be tamed. It's constantly needs to be rewritten through the process, and it's like and it's in constant evolution. So maybe sometimes ideas from the beginning are not good anymore, because the project has evolved to something else, and we should be open-minded to let it become what it needs to become, just like a baby,
and I don't think it knows at the beginning. I mean, the best effort for the script, the writer and the director, and if they're one and the same, it's easier, but it's also harder to untangle, because then that concept has been brewing a long time in that mind. Yeah. And it's very important to be able to tear things apart and rebuild them, because they'll go back together stronger, and questions will help the solutions. Mm. And when I read a script, I read it for the story, and I read it for the characters, and then I go back and read it for my problems, the problems that will come to me as they do.
Okay. So you read it twice.
At least, yeah. And then I go back and look at, okay, what are they asking of me? What is this environment that we're working on that will support this story? Now that I know the characters, does it affect them, or does it not affect them? Is it oppressing them, or is he or she, are they oblivious to the surroundings? And that informs so much of what you end up filling that background with. And I always, if I think that, I'll write down notes, and sometimes I'll go like, oh, if it's something I've never done before, if it's a Western, or if it's a Marie Antoinette.
Western. Man,
I'd love to. I've got great ideas for a Western.
Oh man, I want to do a Western so badly.
It's definitely a tickle I want to itch. But if it's something like that, my first ideas may be cliche. And I go like, what was I thinking? I wasn't digging hard enough. I can completely ignore what my expectations and everybody else's expectations are of that genre and flip it on its head. The more ingrained it is into everybody's expectation, the easier it is to surprise. And that's where it really gets fun. And sometimes you go back and you use certain ideas that need to be there to anchor those worlds. But otherwise, I said world, and I was trying to avoid that so much. My two pet peeve words in this business are industry and world. But I think of us as creative artists and problem solvers.
In French, we call it the septième art, the seventh art form, and in English, it's the film industry, which is kind of too.
I don't make cars on an assembly line. I don't feel like I'm in an industry.
And that's going back to our early conversation. It's fun to go from one genre to another, one style to another, because otherwise we feel like going to the sausage factory or and it's fun to jump from one thing and to challenge. Like when I read a script, I always like try to. I dread, and I'm super like. I have a tendency to put myself into trouble, and I'm excited about finding the right angle to get myself out of trouble. Like okay, you're thinking, how the hell, like you read a script and you're like, how the hell am I going to do this? But let's grab this. Let's grab the bull by the horns and try to figure it out. And I think that's super exciting to challenge, and never do something on cruise control or like always like be afraid. I think the being afraid of failure is a great way to.
No, it's more important to make sure that you've failed. When was the last time you failed? What needs to be close at hand?
No, but it's funny because one thing that I've got a tendency doing even on project is like bringing ideas that sometimes people look at me and they're like, "Are you out of your mind?" And I said, "You know what? It's crazy enough to work." Because sometimes when it's too crazy to work and everybody doubts it, people would put all of their efforts, all of their attention into problem solving it and making sure that nobody fails, because we know that we're on the verge of maybe failure, and we don't want to. Nobody wants to go there.
And that chaotic tension will bring attention.
Yes,
they'll pay attention.
And sometimes, when we think it's too easy, that's when we fail. Fuck, I forgot to tell that. It's like, and it's because we lose our focus when we're walking on a tight rope. It's just like, okay, I need to really, really focus because,
Well, you got to push those ideas uphill if you really believe in them. I want to push them uphill and be challenged on them until they fail, or until somebody I see that somebody else is trying to come up with a better solution, and I'm completely happy when that happens.
Oh yeah.
And I always open my team up to contributions that anybody can contribute anything.
No, me too.
That idea is what we're using.
And I like to surround myself with people who have that attitude as well. Like, okay, let's not, like they all have the eye of the tiger. Like, okay, let's solve this. Let's figure this out, because it's like people were excited.
I did a film in New York, and at the end of the film, my art director, I've done a couple of films in New York, but at the end of this particular one, my art director said, "Oh, I just thrown out and stuff like, I don't know what we're going to do here. Play with it, so knock it around, see what you guys come up with." And they were so confused by that, because they had only worked with designers who were kind of dictatorial and said, like, do this. This is exactly how I want it.
Yeah. And
if somebody else can make it better, I'm not going to stand in the way. Best idea always wins.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And vice versa, working with directors who are very, it's a bit boring. It's like, okay. I think that's what I love filmmaking, because everybody puts their best game into making. It's the most collaborative art form. We're all behind the vision of the director, obviously, but it's the power of everybody like pushing upwards and uplifting the project. That's
when do you know when it's time to let an idea go that you've been pushing uphill and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and everybody's going like, no,
I
and
don't
you,
have,
and
you know what? I don't have much of an ego for ideas.
oh, but
When I have a
it's
good idea, I know
it.
okay, let me tell you, when I have a good idea, I think I know. But sometimes, like I can appreciate I'm easy to be convinced. If I'm a bit of a passionate person, and when if someone has a really good idea, I will celebrate it, and I will just like from anybody from the team, from my team, from the DP, from a PA or from a grip who says, you know what, have you seen this? I'm afraid to talk to the DP, but look at this angle. Like this is a great. Wow, this is great. Let me go talk to the DP. If you're too afraid to talk to the DP, I will talk to the DP and the director because I think you're right. And I think that's what's exciting about filmmaking.
When I know a DP really well, I'll run around and I'll look at things and I'll go, I've spent a lot more time here than you. So just what about this? And if they go like, nah, we'll stay here. And I go, okay. But then once they'll go like, yeah, great. Let's look, just a second. Let's look over there first. And then you also can look out for like, did you really mean there's a bad glare over there? Or did you really mean to give that so much attention? Like everybody has a lot on their plate and they can use us as a team.
Absolutely.
To protect everyone's interest. And it's not stepping on anybody's toes. It's really contributing.
Exactly. We're all there nobody wants to see the other one fail. We're all there to protect each other.
It's protection. Yeah.
But you know what's funny? I did a movie a few years ago, which was a bit depressing because it was a great script. It was, but the director was not. It was very strange because we had a great DP, a great script written by the director, but he was afraid of his team. And in the morning,
afraid of input.
Afraid of input.
Yeah.
So when we welcome the director in the morning, we always because that's our nature. I think I don't know if you're like that, but if I'm on set with the DP, we kind of stand in the sweet spot of the set.
Yeah.
And the director comes to us, and we present. But that guy kind of knew. He caught on to that. And
you were kind of directing him to the sweet spot.
And he hated it, and so he was always choosing the weirdest. Not the weirdest, because weird could be extremely interesting, but he was. And so the DP and I said, okay, let's stand in the not interesting area. And we were playing a game in the morning, like let's stand here. So the director walks by himself to the. Yeah, it turned out into fortunately a very bad.
I used to build sets where
funny experience.
I would say that if the sweet spot works, I always wanted to be on the set. We always try to be on the set when we open a new set to people that haven't visited it and are working on it for the first time. But you want to build a set where they'll naturally gravitate to the sweet spot, even and discover the different angles and depths that you've made for the rest of the story and the blocking. And sometimes it's interesting when you watch the actors go through and figure out their blocking and work out their marks in the morning, whether that stuff gets used or not. And if it doesn't get used, then you can quickly say, oh, they're never going to see over here. I'm going to grab my best stuff over here and put it over here and rearrange. That's an early no budget trick too.
We talked earlier in a previous conversation about sculpting, your approach to designing as building, like creating sets as a sculptor, because we have a different but kind of similar approach. What's your
Well, we both like to make. I like to. I can draw conversationally. Mm-hmm. I can. It's like I can order food and ask for directions. I can sit with another person and draw, and they understand what we're talking about, and they can pick up the pencil and go back and forth and do the same thing. But I wouldn't call myself an illustrator. I wouldn't call myself a replicator of a photorealistic outcome, and I really don't have a desire to do that. But I rely on those people heavily. but I like to build models, and I build models to feel the dimensions, and I'll run around my house and wherever else I am with a tape measure and say, oh, the window should be about there. That feels good to me. And then I'll build that into a model. And I feel like, why am I looking at that wall? I can't stand looking at that wall. And sometimes you look at something in SketchUp and it'll be all these blank planes and you go like, I want to go tear that apart. And with models, you instantly feel the depth. You've constantly got a light variance, whether it's even the fluorescence in your bad office. There's something going on that gives it a volume and a sense of being enticing to wander through. And I find that the directors love it and the DPs love it, because DPs are also making a sculptural sense with light and shadow. And this gives them something to play off of. And I'll tear up that model and do it many, many times just until I figure out the dimensions. And then I go like, measure this, find out what it is. And you were saying that you do the same thing.
I do the same thing. In the 90s, I was telling you, I used to do, because as opposed to you, I'm not very good at drawing and drawing.
I'm not really good.
So I kind of realized that what I should do, because all the other art directors, designers doing commercials or music videos are extremely good at drawing, and they were like, oh, no, this is what we're going to do. And I'm like, ugh. So I started doing like cardboard models. And then in the 2004, a friend of mine who's an architect, the same guy who did actually the chair, showed me SketchUp. And for me, it's a great tool because it's super intuitive, instinct. It goes with instinct, and I carve out just like I sculpt, and I find I look around and I need to figure out like where the light is going to come from, the depth, and I, by moving around, I try to create a space that's going to be interesting and good camera food or camera meat, whatever, and make it interesting and think about and read the script at the same time. Okay, they travel from there to there to there. I try to create I sculpt the space instead of building it. I extract, I push, and I create openings, and without necessarily being too concerned about the architecture for like, okay, I go with the proportions and then I readjust. And in the end, just like you, I give my model to the set designer and the art directors, and they go like, "Do you realize that that bed is like 5 meters long?" I said, "Yeah, but if you look at the character, it's maybe 9 meters, but they reduce it to 6 feet, and it's everything like will scale back to a normal scale." But because when I draw, I go instinct. It's just like SketchUp. I sketch without. I think about proportion more than to, and yeah.
And also by thinking sculpturally, I'm not really that interested in ornamentation. I don't really. It distracts. I like the volumes, and I like the weight, and I like the distances and the stacking. And look, I've got on my desk here. Like sometimes I'll just make paper models like a sketch. I don't even know what it's for, just because it has facets and shapes. And I was making thousands of these during Marie Antoinette, and it had nothing to do with the problems I needed to solve, but it kept me thinking about space and volume. And I was so jealous of you and your solutions on Arrival, because that's got to be some of the most sculptural basic elements, the circle, the rectangle, the obelisk. I mean, so pure. And was there one that started the simplicity? Did you land on the spaceship and then keep the language simple and then keep the hallway simple?
Well, I'm a big believer in the less is more principle. And and when I read the script, when Denis sent me the script, actually I'll go back in time. Just before we started prep on Sicario, I was in Los Angeles, and I was at the LACMA, and I went to see an exhibit, and I was totally blown away by the aesthetics and the light, the importance of light and the space and the fact that you were in a room and you couldn't. It was a sensorial. It was a total.
Was it James Turrell?
It was James Turrell, exactly. It was James Turrell,
Yeah.
and funnily, while being just when I got out of that exhibit, I texted Denis. I say, man, if we ever do a sci-fi movie together, I think this would be a great starting point for discussion. And he replies automatically, "Oh my God, I was in a Turrell exhibit at the Guggenheim, just like."
He experienced the same thing, but a different installation.
Yeah, a different installation, but they were about the same time.
Yeah.
And okay, so we did Sicario, and after that came the well, during the process came the project of the Story of Your Life, Arrival, and that was the first, like, all right, remember that exhibit, Patrice? Let's think in that manner. So so the simplicity came first, and we really tried to do something which was alien to what we would expect, and
back to that touchstone, yeah.
and there's a lot of when you do a sci-fi, the first thing, I was super excited, and then I got really 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 scared. I said, oh my God, how the hell am I gonna survive this? And then I started watching, like sci-fi movies, and I realized, oh my God, they kind of all look similar at some point, starting from 2001. There's the oddities, like the odd ones, like
2001 and Blade Runner, and then you've got all of their stepchildren.
Yeah, exactly. But then there's Tron,
Yeah,
that went like another universe, and then there was the David Lynch Dune, which was also different, very different. And it's okay, the thing is let's be different. Like when you're a really bad musician, and you play in your first band, and you start playing covers, and you realize you really suck because none of the songs you're playing, to your ear and to the ear of the bass player, they sound really really good, but you realize when you record on your cassette player that they don't sound at all like
the original
songs, that they're like the originals. And back in the 80s, if you want to play in a club, they want to hear top 40 or whatever, they want to hear the same sound, exactly the song sound exactly like on the album. So the best solution is to write your own songs, because nobody can relate to anything. So
there you go.
So you apply the same principle, and you go like, okay, so let's do something different. And so you dig a lot, and we had so much fun. We created. Well, it was funny because while Denis and I, we were soft prepping it, we were like solving problems. Hey, yeah, we got an idea, it's different. And then we were realizing, oh crap, we just cornered ourselves in another difficult. When we first had the idea of putting the ship, well, the shape of the ship in the script, it's a sphere, which has landed and created a crater. And then when we had the idea of putting it like upwards, like an obelisk, which was basically I'm gonna say something that's gonna shock, but it was my mouse of my computer to draw, and then my graphic designer went and he pushed it inside, and that became but it was my mouse. Okay, so when we got the idea, Denis wanted it to be vertical, and to try vertical, and we solved the shape of the ship. And then I went, hey, what? Why? Maybe it never lands, because it also in the script it tells the story about like the faith, the human spirit. They come here, but we need to do that extra mile, not extra mile, but physically, was because it was like 30 feet high. But it was just it asked the human to have a little trust. And so how the hell do we go there? So very like normal discussion. It was like, I went, what about a scissor lift? Because the army, they arrived there. There's nothing around. How the hell are they?
Answer. Yeah.
And just like, let's just be like, no nonsense. Just like,
yeah.
That's why like, let's not create something that doesn't exist. Let's go with what they would use.
That's the worst when you over design.
Yeah. It's like,
design.
yeah, it's just let's. And then it was like, oh my God, yeah, but now like they need to walk into a tunnel. Man, it's a different. We're there because we are going to that journey, wanting the unknown. It's another civilization. There's things we don't need to explain, and there's just a gravity shift, and they step up on the railing of the scissor lift, and they just go like, and they start like, that's it. There's another atmosphere. There's another. It's another dimension. It's another like, why not? You know. So yeah, we
established the rules changed. You're free.
Exactly. Let's spin this. Let's not. There's no logic that needs to be followed. And the same thing for the language that my wife cracked basically aesthetically. It needed to be everywhere. I was asking every people when we were like discussing that early language, everything was very human, very code-like, and it was we're not supposed to know it's a language at the beginning. It could be like a skunk. It's a defense mechanism. Who knows? I mean, or like a squid. We're not supposed to know what it is. So we need to figure out later. But anyways, it's fun, man. When you can actually break the rules because there's no rules. There's no rules to be broken, basically, because there's no rules.
And those major breakthroughs happened in pre-production after the script was done or before?
After the script was based on a Ted Chiang short story called "The Story of Your Life."
Yeah, the
script was written, and
were there exacting descriptions of the language?
Absolutely.
The spaceship, the creature.
No, the spaceship was a silver ball, landed in the middle of a field surrounded by an army base, which made me think of a movie that had been a remake of a movie that had been shot a couple years before, and I think it was shot in Vancouver, called The Day the Earth Stood Still. I was like, well, let's not go there.
I like the original one.
Yeah, the original was great. It
was very original at its time.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And we just went, let's do it. Let's do something that going to be surprising. We have the opportunity of being, we are given the opportunity and the responsibility to create something that could be unique and to be, let's not put antennas and let's not put thrusters and let's, it's been seen. It's been seen before.
I think
it's an alien. We're not supposed to. Yeah, it's an alien. So
I kind of panic when the script has a lot of things that I've seen or I know a version of, and it's like you said. It's not really a panic of fear. It's knowing that you have to look and look and look until you see it in a different way.
Yeah.
And it may be exactly as it was written, but you still have to approach it and find a different way of displaying it so that it makes it unique to that film.
And I think I always go into a project that everything is up for discussion. It's not because it's on the written page and it needs to be exactly what's on the written page.
Me too. I absolutely start there.
I
start by reading it and saying, okay, now tell me the story. No. Forget the script. Now tell me what's at the heart. What's important? What are the triggers? What transpires? And then like, but what about this? What about this? Well, and you find out that certain things are in the script kind of as holding places, and other ones are steadfastly to be adhered to, and they need to be there. But some things are, that's not as important.
And it's the same for when you do a period piece, like when you did Marie Antoinette, and I did the Young Victoria I was extremely inspired by Marie Antoinette, by the way. I love that movie. I was not allowed to say that I love that movie on the we have to talk about that another time. But because there was some rules that were broken, And when you do a period piece, it's very important to know your references, but at one point you need to know when to close the book. Okay, I know enough, and tell the story that needs to be done within the period. But you can, it's things need to be
very
accurate.
important thing. I ran into exactly the same problem. I hated art history unless it was from 1950 forward, but I knew it. And I did only enough research to know what was correct. And so if I was breaking a rule, I wanted to know that I was breaking. I didn't want to stumble over it.
Exactly. You have to
then
know that.
I wanted to intentionally keep some things true to form and break certain lines, because that was the second film where I learned that my vision is really the character's vision.
Yeah.
I want to see what she sees. That was a big discovery for me on Lost in Translation. I carried that over to this. Like, I want this to be how she sees this, not how we know it historically, not how her elders built it and presented it, but how it impacts that young mind.
No, but the young Lost in Translation is a perfect example. It's her vision and it's his vision. It's like it's their journey. It's not like absolutely.
Then it became exciting because then I got to go out in Tokyo and find the Tokyo that I wanted to be through her eyes and his eyes. Yeah.
Is it Hans? Oh, Hans is actually
ringing the bell.
He's ringing the bell 20 minutes ago.
Ah,
sorry, we saying lots of questions for KK. Let's dig into some of those. Okay, I'm sorry. I need to go through the questions.
Okay, I'm sure we can't answer them all.
No, I don't have a question. I just want to refer you to the Western, The Hired Hand, 1971, directed, starring Peter
Fonda. I know that very well.
Unbelievable movie because it's so quiet. It's been fully restored, and that's the version I saw a couple of years ago. Check IMDb. This is not only the overlooked Western, but sorely overlooked piece of filmmaking. Beautiful shot by Vilmos Simon, the production design Lawrence J. Paul, Blade Runner. Thank you, Barbara. I don't know that movie.
I know that movie very well. Yeah.
I've never seen it.
I was around when it came out the first time.
And then there's a lot of questions. Huh?
It says, do either of us have agents? Yeah, we have the same agent.
Yes, we do. We do share the same agent.
You're in Montreal and I'm in Los Angeles.
Yeah, but we like the same person. We sleep with the same person.
We do very much.
Okay. KK, did you have a unique choice in production design in Extremely Loud, Incredibly Close, considering the least experience with the world being someone with autism?
That plays into what we just talked about being the character and wandering around. I knew New York very, very well. I'd been going there since the 70s as a music runaround when it was a bombed out city, and playing at nefarious clubs there. And then I went back in the 80s and was inspired by the early hip hop scene. And so I knew a lot of it, but there was a lot of it I didn't know. And when I started that film, I got this book that said New York on Film. And I studied that book and I said, any location that's in that book, we cannot use. We have to go find parts of this city that have never been celebrated before. And I was so happy to run off into every little dead end in Queens and Brooklyn. And we even went to Staten Island, even though we didn't end up using it, because it's supposed to be the kid's journey, and he's obsessive. And so I think that production designers during their location scouting period are obsessive by nature. And so I got to be that kid. And I got to focus, and then not let something go and then let it go. And I don't know all of the traits of autism, but I felt like the ones in the story that we were paralleling and supporting were this obsessive quest for this kid. And I was kind of on the same obsessive quest.
Wow. Okay, I'm sorry, I was listening to you, and I understand I need to read questions because I'm not read questions. Uh,
And
I
that's the
love your
question.
work so much, especially with Spike Jones. What's the creative process like with Spike, and how is it different than Michel Gondry or Sofia Coppola?
Everybody's different. Spike is they're all extremely collaborative and extremely generous with interpretation of their ideas. Michelle, because she's an artist, will sometimes lay out everything out exactingly. He's a puzzle maker, and everything is intricate. And Charlie Kaufman's a puzzle maker, and you can hardly move a word in a Charlie Kaufman script without it having a repercussion, because it pays off later. Everything is threaded very neatly and smartly. And I was lucky enough to do 3 Charlie Kaufman movies in a row. I did Being John Malkovich, an adaptation, and Human Nature, which is a movie that I loved. But we had very little money, and I said, Michelle, there's like 70 sets. We've got $4 million. And I don't have that money. That's the entire budget of the movie. How are we going to do this? And he says, I will storyboard every frame to the inch. And he storyboarded every frame. I said, do I need anything past this? And he says, no. And I had sets stacked up. This one is 12 feet long. That's 6 feet long. That's 8 feet long. That's 20 feet long.
Wow, super precise.
And then we'd rotate them. And we were very economical in using them. And we shot exactly like he programmed. And we made devices so you could see out the window and see a reflection of something else, and a lot of projection. There's an amazing miniature to live action to projection dream sequence in that film, which is, Michel at his best. And then Sophia is extremely generous as well. She would give me kind of a montage tear sheet of the feeling, which is like, and music as well. And it was like a visual playlist. Like, here's your mixtape. And it would have things that you didn't understand how they related to the film yet. All of the images for Marie Antoinette were contemporary, but there were colors, there were textures. One was a picture of a pony. You got in sync.
That's her way to communicate. It's yeah.
And then the communication doesn't just stop with the script and the beginning. You constantly drink in what you found out in the world, absorbing locations and information, and present back. And then they get excited, and then they steer you this way, and then you represent again. It's a constant give and take. And the things that we discovered on the way are always the best things that happen in all of those films.
How did you find the balance of nature and civilization in your design for Wild Things, for where the Wild Things are?
Civilization, well, that was kind of like the opposite of her. Here you've got animals. There's one rule changed in there. Animals are intelligent. They can speak. But quickly on, we made a decision not to have any improved props. There were no tools. There weren't tables and chairs. There was none of that. Once he crossed over from the real world, we shot this all in Australia, from the real world, and he sailed away on his boat to the imaginary world of Wild Things. The only tools were something that I used birds a lot because I thought they made the best structures. Given that they don't have hands, they've just got a beak in their claws. They make these gorgeous nests. And so it became organic that they would build these nests, and they didn't have tools. And it was the same with the structures that we would build. And it was kind of like Arrival in a way. We've got spheres and we've got straight lines in the trees. And everybody expected us to go to Hawaii or to the jungle. And I said, I went to look at those places, and I was comfortable. I felt like having a picnic. I felt like hanging out. I didn't feel like it was wild and dangerous until we went to Australia.
It doesn't have much variety compared to Australia and New Zealand.
And well, in Australia, we found these burnt forests, and all of a sudden you had depth, and you had what looked like drawings, these lines that were burned and only the trunks remained. And then the fires went through so fast that they would flash the leaves on the top, and they would cover the ground in these silver leaves.
Wow.
And Spike had the idea that we would have all the seasons happening at once. And so you've got this burnt forest that looks like it's fall, but yet spring is happening and trees are growing up. And I decided, but they'd be brand new trees with fall colors rather than green. And I erased green from the palette. I said, I've been to green. I don't want any green in the movie. And that was my subtraction on that case. And then finally, the DP, Lance Accord, said, I'm so sick of all this brown. We need some green. We need to change the palette. There's a journey where Max and Carl, the lead Wild Thing, go off to this mountain, and he shows him the miniature city of how he dreamed that they would live. And we kept passing all the locations were outside of Melbourne, and we kept passing this nice little green glade with these beautiful trees. And we decided to go back and shoot part of that journey there. So as soon as we make a rule, we broke that rule. But it's the only instance of green in the entire film.
KK, I think I'm being rushed by Hans.
I think we've overrun our limit. They're gonna have to.
Yeah, we've overrun our limit, and they're pulling the plug. I'm sorry.
We finally bored somebody with the chaos.
But you know what? What's great is like, I would like to continue that conversation.
We will.
Yeah. So.
And sorry for any of the questions that we didn't get to answer.
Sorry for all the questions. I'm sorry I was too caught up in the conversation with KK. To everybody,
you were right. 90 minutes is nothing.
Yeah, it's
90 minutes is nothing, and that was fantastic. Patrice and KK, thank you so much for joining us. And I do think we need to, there's got to be a part 2 to this to cover more of the incredible work. I mean, this conversation could keep going and going and going, and just be as fascinating in hour 3.
Need more wine.
That's right. We'll send some wine around.
Right?
We'll make it happen. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you.
That was absolutely
Thank
wonderful.
you. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely wonderful. Next week, we're taking a break to tune into the Canadian Screen Awards celebrations, which are happening throughout the week. After that, we're in June with a packed slate, including directors Bruce McDonald, Sarah Polley, Helen Shaver, Philippe Falardeau, Cassie Lemons, Christian Sparks, and Star Wars, the original Star Wars picture editor, Paul Hirsch. It continues to be an absolutely incredible ride. And we hope in these very challenging times that it's providing relief and entertainment, and there's no doubt inspiration. Be safe, be well, and have a great night. KK, Patrice, thank you again so very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye, Patrice.
Bye, KK.
Talk soon.
Very soon. Cheers. Bye. How do we leave?